Hey everyone, welcome back. TimProVision here. We are back with my updated and detailed settings breakdown for Apex Legends Season 11. I cannot believe it. We are already in the 11th season of Apex. If you are looking to be a better player, then honestly, there is no better place to start than your settings. Setting yourself up for success literally can be a huge factor for winning more gunfights and games, and there's a ton of little things that you should be aware of. I also do believe my current advanced look controls or ALC settings will help you be an absolute beamer in game. If you are not a controller user, have no fear, as there are still a ton of great things for you to know in those gameplay and video tabs. Do me a huge favor and hit that like button, and we're going to kick it off with the gameplay tab. Starting off, we have the interact prompt style. I'm going to have this on default. If I change it to compact and go up to something, you'll notice how it's really small. It just says shatter caps and I can pick it up. Personally, I like to just be notified of what I am getting. It tells you what guns go on it. I just leave this as default. I've never used it the other way. If you want a little less clutter on your screen, you could do that as compact. Button hints, I'm going to have on. It basically just has the buttons on the bottom of your screen there. It'll tell you what button you got to press to do what ability. If you're very experienced in the game, you probably don't need to have this on, but I leave it on just because I do like it. Crosshair damage feedback is exactly what it sounds like. It is basically your hit markers. Now, if you put it on X and I do a couple shots, you'll see the X's in the middle of your screen. I personally like to have this set as off so I don't have any kind of clutter around the enemy I'm shooting at. If I have this as off, I don't have any distractions when I am hitting an enemy. The only reason why you may want to leave crosshair damage feedback on is because of gas damage. If you pop a gas trap or if an enemy walks into a Watson fence and you're not looking at them, you won't really have any feedback as to them getting damage from those abilities. Personally, you still get an audible cue, and I can still kind of tell if it is happening, but this is something that you should be aware of. So I do like to leave this as off because I don't like the clutter. Damage numbers I have as stacking. If you have them off, obviously you're not going to be knowing really how much damage you're doing to enemies. If you put them as both, you're going to have stacking numbers and the floating individual numbers. I personally just like to have the stacking, so when I am shooting, I'm getting the total amount of damage I'm dealing. I don't need the floating also. I don't need to know what my guns are doing per bullet. Moving on, we have ping opacity. You can leave this as default if you want. If I change it, it basically just has the ping being a little bit darker. I leave it as faded so it's not really blocking anything, or I don't want to be missing anything because my ping opacity is just too dark and I can't see through it. Obituaries, this is your kill feed. You'll want to leave this on. Minimap rotation, I like to have this off. Basically, when you're in game, if you're looking around, this makes the minimap always stay in the one direction, with the top being north and the bottom being south. This just lets me better orientate myself in game as to where I am looking. If I'm looking east and I'm not quite sure of it for some reason, I can look at the map and see where my character is looking. If it's turning with me, I find this is a little bit too hard for me to tell what way I'm looking quickly. It also makes calling out enemies a little bit harder because my map is rotating with me. I just like to leave this as off, and it is what I have done in all my games. Weapon auto cycle on empty. This is exactly how it sounds. If you put this on and your gun runs out of ammo, you are going to swap weapons automatically when you run out. I like to have this off. I don't want the game switching weapons for me. Maybe I want to punch someone, but the game is starting to swap my weapon for me. I don't want this to happen. I like to leave this as off, so when I am in a gunfight, I can just manually switch weapons if I want to. I know when I am going to run out of ammo. I don't need the game to tell me this. Auto sprint is kind of a big one. A lot of people like to have it on. For you, I would probably recommend for you to have it on. I have just always played my games with no auto sprint, so I've always left this off. Leaving this on will also save your stick, because honestly, you're hitting in that left stick a lot when you are sprinting, and it will damage your stick over time. So if you want to save your controller a little bit, you can turn this on, but I'm going to leave it off because this is what I enjoy. Double tap to sprint is another thing that you could turn on if you want to. I personally don't like to have double tap to sprint on. I like to have it off. Basically, double tap to sprint is if I click this and I double click my left stick, my guy will start sprinting. I don't really need this to happen. I just like to have it as off. Jetpack control is all to do with Valkyrie. You want to have this on as hold. Basically, when you are Valkyrie, if I just double tap jump and hold jump, I'm going to just keep going up and I can let go when I want to fall off. If you have this as toggle, then you kind of have to press A again or press your jump button again for you to fall. And I find this is just very unintuitive and doesn't feel natural at all. I suggest you leave jetpack as hold. Incoming damage feedback. You have 2D, 3D, or 2D, 3D. I leave this as 3D. Basically, this just gives me a three-dimensional arrow as to where the damage is coming from. If you want less information for some reason, you can do 2D, and this will just show you the general direction, or you could do both. I just do 3D because this just gives me the exact location of where my shots are coming from. Taking damage, closest death box, or crafting menu. This is one of the biggest settings in the game for you to adjust. You want to have this as off. If you are in a death box trying to get an armor swap as an enemy team is chasing you, and they shoot you once and you get backed out of that death box, you might not be able to get the armor swap. So you want to have this as off, so when you are in that death box or you're trying to get a very quick armor swap as an enemy is shooting you, you don't get backed out at the very last second when you're about to swap. Definitely have this as off. I can't recommend it more. Hop up, pop up. This is exactly as it sounds. So if I swap to the wingman in the bottom right hand corner of my screen, it'll tell you right there what the hop up is. From this, we have streamer mode, anonymous mode, and usage sharing. These first two are basically just things to protect your identity in game. So if you're a big time streamer or you don't want anyone else to know what your name is, you can adjust these. Anonymous mode is really more about the other enemies. So if you put this as enabled, no other players in the game, you'll be able to tell who they are. And again, this is really just all about encountering stream sniping. You probably don't need to worry about this. I suggest leaving them off so you can see enemies' names. Usage sharing, if you don't want data to go to EA, you can turn this as disabled. I just don't care. Performance display is exactly as it sounds. If you press on in the upper right hand corner of my screen there, it'll tell you what your FPS is, your ping, your loss, your packet loss, and your little ID number. I leave this as off because I like recording with nothing on my screen. You might want to have it on so you can tell if you're lagging and what is going on and if you're getting frame rate drops or that kind of thing. Club invites I have as disabled. I just get a lot of them from you guys. No offense, I love you, but I do not want to get spammed club invites, so I leave this as disabled. You can probably leave it on. And then we have a couple accessibility features. This will really come down to what your preferences are. A big change for me from last season to this season is I am no longer using Tritanopia. They changed the damage number color for Tritanopia to make it in line with the yellowness of it. It was red, now it's yellow. I don't like it anymore. I'm just running the straight up default. And then from that, we're gonna have subtitles, subtitle size, chat features, convert incoming voice to chat text. I just leave all this as off or normal. I don't need any of this. This is really up to you and if you need any of that. Some people do like to have subtitles so the characters that are talking, you can see what they are saying. I personally don't like the text coming on screen. I don't want my screen to be cluttered up with more stuff that just kind of isn't necessary because I can already hear it. Moving on now, let's go to the controller tab. We're going to have the button layout. This is a huge thing. I'm going to try to go through this pretty quick for you. Obviously, most people have default by default because it's default. However, there's a couple I want to point out. The first is going to be button puncher. This is what I use. I use paddles on my controller. On the back of my controller, I have jump and crouch. If you do not want to accidentally melee with your right stick, I would definitely suggest button puncher. This also lets you kind of crouch spam in fights since you can hit that right stick while also aiming. But for me, I use button puncher because I do not want to accidentally be just meleeing for nothing. So I use this. If you are new to the game and you want to use what I think is the best controller scheme and you do not have paddles, this would be Evolved. Evolved is pretty much the same thing as if you had paddles. It is basically moving stuff around so that you can still have full control of both of your sticks while also aiming and shooting and doing abilities and that kind of thing. Basically, this just kind of prevents you from having to move your right thumb to the buttons and then back, because when you're doing that, you obviously can't move your character, you can't be aiming, and this just kind of prevents that. Evolved is absolutely the button layout I suggest you to use if you are new to Apex Legends and you get used to this. This will just make you a much better player if you do not have paddles, of course. If you have paddles, then I recommend button puncher so you're not accidentally mailing with the right stick. From that, we're gonna have stick layout. Pretty much everyone should just use default, I would say, unless you want some really weird stuff. Interact reload, I have tap to use and tap to reload. There is a couple other options here. You could do hold to use and tap to reload. This basically means every time you pick up something, you're gonna have to hold down your pickup button. I don't like this. You could do the other way where you got tap to use and then hold to reload. So you can just tap to pick up everything or tap to use a door, but then you got to hold down your reload button every time to use it. I just like to have tap for both. It does have a couple drawbacks, like if you're standing in front of a door and you're just trying to reload, you might open the door. I know it's kind of something annoying to get used to. You can just look away from the door and then hit reload if you didn't know that. But I like to do tap to use and tap to reload so it's as quick as possible. I don't need to worry about anything else, and I don't really need to worry about holding the button down. Crouch button, you have toggle and hold. If you're looking to really excel your gameplay, I suggest doing hold because you can bunny hop much easier if you do have your crouch button set as hold. If you have it set as toggle, you won't really be able to do it as easily, even though you still kind of can do it. It's just not as easy in my opinion. So I suggest doing this as hold. Unless you do not care about bunny hopping, then you can just do toggle. Aim button, I have hold, pretty self-explanatory. Survival slot, I have this on so I can throw heat shields super easy, and it is something that I think is worth having on. After this, we're going to have trigger dead zones. This is basically just how much you have to pull the trigger in order to have the shots come out. I leave this as default. You can kind of tweak with it if you want to kind of try it out. I don't think it's really necessary to change it, but you may want to try it out. I leave it as default. Menu cursor speed, this is another huge one I would say that a lot of people aren't really realizing is a big deal. If you have your menu cursor speed on way too low, it is just going to be way too long when you're looting. You're not going to be able to move around a death box as fast. And then likewise, if you have it way too high, you're just going to be moving around way too fast where you're going to be misclicking. You might not pick something up. You might get out of the death box not realizing. You basically want to have this as high as possible within your ability to control it. I like to leave it somewhere in the middle. It's probably what I would recommend for you as well. Movement and aiming is all controlled by my ALC settings. We'll get to this in a little bit, but this is basically locked because I am using advanced look controls. Movement dead zones basically is just if you're having stick drift and your character is moving while you are not even touching the stick, you can adjust this to large. I personally recommend leaving it as small unless you are having that stick drift, then you can set it as large. Inverted look, if you want your look controls to be inverted, you can put this on inverted. I leave it as off. And then you have vibration. I like to leave vibration off. I have always played shooters for the past 25 years with vibration off. I find it just helps me better control recoil, just better kind of enhance my skills because my hands aren't shaking while I am pulling the trigger. Now we do have the advanced look controls, probably what most of you are interested in. I do leave this as on. I'm going to try to go through these fairly simply. I would say there's a lot in here that you can adjust, but it is nothing too overwhelming, I would say at the same time. Dead zones, I have this set as 8%. If I lower dead zones all the way, you're going to notice I have crazy drift. I'm not touching my stick at all right here, but it is drifting. You could probably start with something like 5% for dead zone and then work your way up till you do not have any drift. 8% is the magic number for me where I don't have any drift. If you do have dead zone set too high, it'll just basically take forever for you to move the stick before you actually start moving. Outer threshold, this basically just kind of reduces the outer radius of the stick. So if we move this all the way up, you can see on the right, basically that red line is where the outer edge of the stick is going to be. You want to have this set all the way down so you can get more fine-tuned movements. Moving from this, we have response curve. This is basically just the overall kind of movement of how your character is moving, how it's feeling when you're looking around. If you have this as too low, it'll take a really long time to start kind of getting you to move. And if you have it too high, there's pretty much no in between. You're either moving all at once or you're not moving at all. I suggest leaving this on 7 is what I do. You could adjust this a little bit either way. And you can read on the right, affects how sensitive the stick is across its range of movement. Lower values can feel too twitchy, higher values can feel too dull. So there you go. For the per optic settings, I suggest you just kind of try this out on your own, but basically I have the iron sights set as 1.0 and the 10 times set as 2.0. Basically, the further you go in optic zoom, the more you want to increase the multiplier. This is just like how fast you are moving in that ADS zoom. This kind of is just what works for me. And honestly, it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, I'm just increasing like 0.2 every 2 times zoom I go in. And I think this will work for you if you want a baseline, but I think you should try it out in the firing range. Moving on from the per optic settings, we are going to have both the look controls. This is actually how fast your character is looking around. And likewise, we have the ADS look controls. So this is how fast you are zooming around when you are aimed down sights. First off, yaw speed, pitch speed. This is how much you are looking left and right or up and down. You want the up and down, which is the pitch speed, to be a little bit lower than your left and right. You don't have to look up and down as much as you do left and right. And this is why you want to do it. Also, by leaving the pitch speed a little bit lower, you will have a little bit less recoil and it will be a little bit easier to control because you are looking up and down a little bit less. For the tuning extra yaw and tuning ramp up times and delays, all these, I have them set as 0. This basically just means the more you are looking left, the more you're looking right or up and down, the faster it starts to ramp up. I want when I am looking left, right, up and down, I want it to all be consistent. And by setting these to 0%, it is. And if you want the values that I start at, 390, 300, this feels something like, I would say 6 and 4 on the default settings for look sensitivity and ADS look sensitivity. You could start with this and go down or up depending on if you think you can't control it or if you can control it. From this, we have the ADS ones. You again don't want to set these as too high or too low. So I leave 120 and 102. And then I have all the ramping set to 0 because I don't want to be kind of ramping up as I am ADSing. This just feels weird to me. I don't think it's too good. You want to have consistency. From this, we have target compensation and melee target compensation. This is basically just aim assist. You want to have this on. And then target compensation style, I suggest having this as default. You have a little bit more aim assist if you are on console, and this is the default setting. If you're thinking of going to PC, or if you are going to be playing in like ALGS or something, you could set this as PC. So you do have that same aim sensitivity multiplier, but if you are on console, just leave this as default. It'll give you a little bit more and you will be a better beamer. And that is my ALC settings. Let me know what you think of these down in the comments, guys. Of course, this is all just a general starting point. You should do what feels best for you, and this is what works well for me. Moving on to the rest of the settings, we just have a few more tabs. We got the video. Brightness is really dependent on your monitor. I leave it right in the middle. Field of view, this is a huge one. I believe it's 80 by default, but basically this is just how much you are seeing around you. If I set this to 70, you can almost see like it's really punched in. I can't see much to my left and right. And then if I go back to what I was at, or if I go to 110, I can see so much around me now. I recommend that you do at least 90. I like 104 because it's what I have always done on all of my shooters. You don't really need to use 104. You could do 110 if you want to have maximum kind of look around you, but I like to do 104. Field of view ability scaling. Basically, when you're moving around with something like Octane Speed, Bloodhound Ultimate, it likes to punch out the field of view a little bit because it kind of likes to make you feel like you're moving even faster. I leave this as disabled. I don't want my field of view to be changed just because I'm using an ability. I want consistency, so I have this as disabled. Sprint view shake, have this as minimal. You don't want normal. You want to have the minimal amount of sprint viewing shake, so when you're running around, you don't want your screen to be shaking too much. From this, we have audio. This is really all up to you, but basically, I leave my sound effects all the way up. I've dropped my music in lobby music volumes way down to 5%. I like the music, but I do not want to be blaring. I don't want to be missing something. And honestly, I don't want the stream to be just kind of blaring out because I have music. And dialogue volume is a similar thing. I like to leave this a little bit lower, so when I am in game, I'm not missing footsteps or gunshots or something like that because of the dialogue volume. I like to have this as half. I had the master volume set as 65%, basically just for my setup and my streaming setup. This can change for you, but this is what I leave it as. After this, we're just gonna have disable voice chat. You know, if you don't want to hear people in game, put it on. If you do, leave it off. I suggest you leave it off. And convert incoming voice to chat text. I just have this as off because it is the default. I don't really find any need for this. So there you have it, guys. My updated settings video for Apex Legends Season 11 Escape. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. I always answer comments down there. I would love to interact with you. Also, if you have any more questions or if you're looking for someone to play with, hop into our community Discord. We have almost 4,000 members in there. There's always people looking to play with others, and if you don't want to sweat it out with randoms, hop in there. I think it'll be a good time for you. Be sure to follow me on Twitch. That is where I stream, over on Twitch at TimProVision. Guys, I appreciate the support. Hit that like button. Until next time, happy gaming, everyone.